Hey guys, and welcome to episode 6 of Wren. Please just buy a real palette. Please, they're not expensive. They're really not that expensive. You can afford it. Just buy a real palette. No. Today I am painting with gouache. This is the first time I've used gouache in at least 3 years. And I actually remember disliking it a lot. I can't remember what exactly I didn't like about it so much, but I think it was probably the thing that I like about it most now that I disliked about it most then. Gouache has a consistency that is very unique because you can water it down, or you can use it straight out of the tube at its thickest consistency, which means you have a wildly large variety of consistencies you can use the paint at. This means that you have to have a little bit more knowledge of the control you need to use the paint. Obviously, with things like watercolor, you need to know how much or how little water to use, and that's a learning curve. But it works a little bit differently with gouache, and I did have a little bit of trouble with that at first, and several times in these pieces, but overall, I really liked it this time around, and I'm really glad that I liked it this time around. For the swatching of these paints, I did 2 swatches for each color. I did. On my watercolor swatch page, I did a gradient for every single color, using it at its thickest consistency and pushing with water all the way to as thin as I could get it. And for this one, I didn't want to do that. First of all, gouache doesn't really like to work that way. It can. Maybe higher quality gouaches can. This is the same brand as my watercolor brand is, which is Reeves. I believe that it's student grade, and by I believe I mean it has to be, because I did not spend a lot of money on these paints. The reason that I did 2 swatches was because I don't want to fight with the materials that I'm using, so I kind of just wanted to see what the paint looks like when it dries at a thicker consistency and what it looks like when it dries at a thinner consistency. And that is because gouache doesn't always dry the same color that it paints with. I'm not totally sure why that is, and I'm not totally sure if it's all gouache or if it's just some gouaches, but a lot of them do tend to have a tonal shift when they dry. I didn't notice this very much in painting, but I have definitely seen in other people's work that that is a thing that happens. So I just wanted to know everything that I could about the paints I was going to be working with before I started working with them. After swatching everything out, I did write the color name next to it. I have emerald green, leaf green, blue lake, ultramarine, yellow ochre, lemon yellow, medium yellow, burnt sienna, crimson, brilliant red, which I labeled as crimson, white, and black. I also did a little color study. I did 2 color studies, one from crimson to medium yellow, and one that went from blue lake to emerald to, I believe, leaf green. Yeah, it was leaf green. Anyways, if you follow me on Instagram, you probably already know, not only did I label brilliant red as crimson 1 time, I labeled it as crimson 2 times on this sheet. I don't know what it was. This part I did after all of the painting, so I think my brain was just fried and I had crimson on the brain. I was trying not to mess up, so naturally I messed up several times on my favorite color. At the end of all of my swatching, I do write Reeves Gouache right at the bottom, and that's just because I only have half a brain, so this will help me remember. Here we are, getting into the fun stuff. For this first peach, I decided to do a wholly green background. This green is leaf green mixed with, I want to say, lemon yellow and a touch of crimson. And I just wanted to get it really sort of desaturated, but hopefully it would make the reds and oranges I was using pop a little bit. Unfortunately, I did not get that effect from it. It kind of just made my colors muddy. I did more layers than I probably would have needed to if I hadn't added that green background. And in the next couple that I do, I forego the background pretty much entirely. While I like the idea of it, it just was not achieving the look that I was hoping for. If I had added it at the same time as or after, it probably would have turned out much better. But I was finding that my wet paint was just reactivating the gouache that was sitting underneath in the background, which was making all of my colors much more desaturated and much more green leaning, and that was not really what I was hoping for. After all of my paint is dry and all of my layers are layered, you can tell this one had a little bit of a color shift in drying, actually, which was interesting because I didn't notice that until watching it right now while recording the voiceover. But I am overall relatively content with how this whole peach turned out. Like I said, the colors are muddy, and I'm a little disappointed with that, but for a first attempt using gouache in 3 years, I'm gonna say that it was pretty much a success. I went back in and I darkened up a little bit of the background just to try to differentiate it a little bit more, and I do think that was a nice little touch. It did not fix all of my problems, but it was a good touch. And then I add just a little extra yellow to separate the front of the peach from the stem, and that was about it. For the second one, I forwent the background entirely. I didn't do one. I jumped right in with first crimson and then brilliant red, because I had to, mixed with a little bit of medium yellow. And for this one, I just kind of wanted to be extra painterly. Is that how I say that? I wanted to have a really textured look, and I wanted to have more of the idea of the shape and the dispersion of colors. This video is great. This voiceover is going fantastic, guys. I just wanted it to capture the feeling of the picture. And so that's what I did. I tried to keep it really, really loose, but I did go in with a little bit of purple added to the yellow for the bits on top that are a little bit more defined in their shape. I really, really like how this one turned out, guys. I blended out those lines as much as I could because I still wanted to keep this relatively refined. I didn't want to render it too much, and I think I did a pretty decent job of it. After all of that, I added a little bit of Blue Lake, which is that almost phthalo blue-ish color, and then I accidentally blended it out underneath and made a neat little drop shadow. That was not my intention at all. I actually had added too much water to the Blue Lake, and I hated it. So I was trying to lift it like you lift watercolor, and that's not how gouache works. So, you know, happy accidents, like Bob Ross says. I added a little bit more highlight with adding in some white into some white into my yellow and brilliant red mixture. And I took, I believe it was burnt sienna, but it may have been crimson, and I added just a little hint of a stem there. And you can tell from that comparison, this second one worked so much better than the first one. This third one I wanted to keep even looser, even more impressionistic. I really like it, but I know that it doesn't totally look like a peach at the end, and that's okay. The reference I'm using was very, very pink. Like, it may have not actually even been a real peach, it was so pink. Like, it may have been like a fake, like, decorational? Decorational? I've had a long day, guys. It may have been like a decoration. It may have been like a little plushy toy thing. I don't totally know. It looked like a real peach and I painted it. I kept this one super, super analogous in the color palette. I used crimson and brilliant red both, but I did not use a lot of yellow. I used a teeny, teeny, tiny bit, but I used more white in this piece than I had in the other ones. And I honestly think that it turned out super, super cool. The perspective on this peach was also a bit interesting because the first two that I did, you could see the top. And this one, we're looking more at the bottom of the peach. That's what the little hint of dark color in the middle of nowhere land is. It's the hint of the very bottom of the peach. And at this point, I'm noticing I went way, way, way too dark right away with the pink color. There's definitely much more of a light pink and white section in there somewhere. But the good news is that while with watercolor you want to layer from your lightest colors to your darkest colors because you can't make them lighter, gouache is closer to like an acrylic or an oil paint almost, in that you kind of want to save your lightest colors till the very end, because if you don't, that white can mix with any color that has black in it, and it can give you some really, really muddy colors when you're not hoping for them. So the good news about going too dark on that pink initially is that I was able to go back in and lighten it up. And I was also able to add, I think I added Blue Lake as, no, I must have added Ultramarine. So I added Ultramarine in with my Crimson to make those darker tones on this last peach. I had a lot of fun with these. Thank you guys for hanging out and watching me paint some peaches and listening to me stutter for 13 minutes. I really appreciate it. I'll see you guys in the next one. Bye.